Takstashila's 2025 China Challenge Survey is your opportunity to have a say in how India approaches China today and in the years to come. So zoom out, weigh in, and make your voice heard. Take the survey today. Link in description.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of All Things Policy. I'll be your host for the day, Adya, and I'm going to be speaking to my colleague, Ashwin. Something we've been thinking and talking about a lot is how AI impacts things like power dynamics, because as far as I know, I studied IR, so I have a set idea of how power plays out. You have your military power, you have your coercive power, then you have the industrial heft that you have behind what you do, you have a talented population, then, of course, the sheer size of your population. I mean, these are all things that I think are the ingredients of power, but we've been trying to understand how AI plays in and how it fits in with all of these things, and whether it modifies how these pre-existing aspects that constitute the fabric of power work, because does it add to them? Does it alter them? Is it just another ingredient added to this mix? So yeah, Ashwin and I are going to be talking about this, and let's dive right in. So I wanted to ask if you think AI is forcing us to rethink the definition of power and what it constitutes, or whether it's just another factor that impacts what a country is able to do in the international forum.
That's an interesting question. I think it's a bit of both, mostly because we have seen and heard promises of what AI can do in the coming years, but we have actually not witnessed it yet. So there is tangible effects of AI playing out in our societies and economies, but a large-scale impact that makes a sizable difference between a country that harnesses the power of AI and one that doesn't, in terms of, let's say, military power or geopolitical outcomes, is yet to be observed, even if it has taken place at a certain level. So at this point, with the limited data we have, we can only speculate and analyze and try and theorize about what it might do and might not do. But I still think it's a useful exercise because, it keeps us a step ahead.
Okay, if we're speculating and if we're looking back to previous examples, let's say we understand AI to be a general purpose technology. I think Jeffrey Ding came up with that idea. It's basically any technology that has broad level implications and those applications are diffused across sectors. So therefore, the impact it has on different areas of the economy is great. And if we're looking at something like STEAM, which I think is a good example of a general purpose technology that plays in with power. Like something like STEAM, played an integral role in the Industrial Revolution. It shaped how transport worked, it shaped how manufacturing worked. But when it comes to AI, do you think of it as something which will add new aspects? Like, I think industrial power became really, really important with the Industrial Revolution when technologies like STEAM became part of the equation. But I don't know, when it comes to things like industrial power, I think AI might just modify how it works. I mean, it's not going to take away the factor altogether, but I think it'll impact how industrial power plays out, what role it plays, but also it just affects the importance that industrial capacity has, right? While, diminishing other factors. So what do you think about that?
A useful way to look at this would be to classify some ingredients or elements of power that translate into military and economic power, finally translating into total national power, and seeing what remains the same or what becomes less important or more important or what is completely irrelevant. Taking up your industrial capacity angle, right? I would say that the industrial capacity angle was always relevant, at least in the past centuries. Maybe the pre-Napoleonic Wars, you had smaller militaries under monarchies in Europe, in the European context, who numbered in a few thousands, right? Even going back to Alexander's army, it was a few tens of thousands and not more than that. In which case, arming them and providing them with weapons and equipment was not a massive ordeal, because a few hundred thousands, what's the big deal, right? But then from the time Napoleon enters the scene and then leading up to the world wars, you have much more massive armies, and these armies are also using firepower. So you have ammunition, you have rifles, you have missiles, bombs, and much more technical need for a larger industrial capacity, which then starts contributing a lot to the power equations. And then industrial capacity suddenly becomes extremely important. So going from where it was during the World War era to where it is today, it has broadly remained the same, but it has changed in terms of what we want the industries to be making. So now suddenly you have something like semiconductor industry becoming extremely important, right? So the industrial capacity to have semiconductor fabrication facilities in your country or in allied countries is an important geopolitical chip. Like case in point, the TSMC in Taiwan. So those things, I guess. So has industrial capacity become less important? No. Has it become more important? Probably, but it has always been very important. But it's just that the production needs have changed. It's that the nature of what is being produced has changed, and countries are racing to adapt to that, which is why you have subsidies for all things AI in so many countries, including India, AI policy, AI in action plan, AI Act, and all of that.
Okay. I was trying to think of other factors that would be at play, and I thought of of course, population size and then talent, like having an educated set of people who have expertise in their own right and all of that. I don't know, for population size, I feel like the importance, the size of the population may play would actually diminish, right? Because historically, of course, if you were fighting wars, you needed to have a large population. You needed to be able to back whatever you're doing with numbers. There was strength in numbers. But with a technology like AI, wouldn't that change? Because if you're automating certain processes, you no longer need to have that many people working on a system. Or even for certain military functions, if you can send an unmanned vehicle into an area that would previously require, let's say, troops, then instead you're basically training personnel to be able to operate these systems, but you may actually need less people. So even though the resources that may go into training XYZ people may be higher, the number of people would be lower. So how does population size work, in your opinion, when it comes to national power with emerging technologies, of course, that may reduce the need for manpower?
Yeah, population is a very interesting one, and I think it definitely changes under the AI lens. Again, drawing back to the industrial age and the 20th century, leading up to the 21st century and the information age, I think population mattered a lot more before. Even pre-World War One, in the balance of power scenario in Europe, there was a huge insecurity among France and Britain and all of these nations, because Germany was had a massive population, and their population was relatively young compared to the previous land power, which was France, which was slowly was facing an aging scenario with its own population. So in that sense, population was a massive factor. But now that the AI technology is able to somehow increase the efficiency of what a single person can do, and potentially automate some of the tasks that a person performed in their individual scope. And since this is so scalable across militaries or economies, both in the civilian and the military realm, I think populations do become much less important looking ahead, maybe a couple of decades down the line especially. So that is good news for countries like Europe, some of the countries in Europe, which are struggling with a population crisis in terms of their aging populations. And it's also good news for countries like China, which also have a skewed age ratio in their population thanks to population control measures they took. So that's actually an important point and will change how countries think about their own like population control measures, whether it be to control it or to supplement it.
Okay, just to play the devil's advocate, I mean, we've talked about countries that would benefit from this. But what about countries who've historically relied on their demographic weight, who've had sizable populations, and that has been their source of power? What are the implications likely to be for them? Is there going to be a shift in the priorities that they need to have as they roll out their policies? Or do you think that these sections of the population will just be plugged in elsewhere in the economy?
I think even the countries with populations that they can harness will be advantaged, because that just means that they can do that much more with the manpower they have. So even India is said to be enjoying its demographic dividend now. And so it just shows to stand that India can actually get more done out of the people that it has in its working age population. It can aim for higher productivity gains, and it can get more out of what that population would have been able to do compared to a few years ago. So it's basically a shifting up of the baseline. So it's not as much as bad news for the highly populated regions, as much as it is good news for the less populated or countries with skewed age ratios, countries that are struggling with skewed age ratios, because they, now that the baseline has shifted, they are less in a less precarious position compared to what they would have been otherwise. But countries with population will continue enjoying the advantages that they always had, I guess.
Okay, that's interesting actually. When we talk about the population, of course, we talk about the numbers, but we also think about it in terms of skills. So my understanding, of course, is that while AI will highly utilize the skills of certain sectors of the population, it'll also then again take away from highly skilled professionals in other fields whose jobs it's just cutting out. So how do you think tech talent, or talent in general for that matter, is likely to operate within this new axis?
Yeah, talent is, I think, ever more important now, because so much of the national power is derived from technology and research and scientific prowess. And it's not just that you need talent to develop AI or the next big thing, but to constantly adapt and innovate and, keep pace with whatever is happening in the world. So I think a talented workforce is very important. And we'll also see this playing out in terms of how globalization handles talent migrations between countries. There will be efforts from countries to retain their talent. There will also be efforts from countries to attract skilled talent. Even the countries with a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric will still want to attract high skilled talent while preventing the other forms of migration that they're trying to control. So we will. This is going to be interesting to see, and we've even seen this play out, right? Like the Trump was recently, like in the headlines because the U.S. government deported a few South Koreans, and then there was an offer to get them back because they possessed a certain skill set that the American industry needs. And so you will see these back and forths happening, and that's going to be interesting to study. And because of technologies like AI with supply chains that aren't just restricted to national borders but are truly global, and there is a very small chunk of the value chain that each country occupies, and so therefore they simply naturally need to rely on their partners in other countries to take it forward. We will also likely see that there will be blocks within the world in how countries cooperate with each other, while also trying to keep their know-how and talent and technology from their adversaries. So I think this is going to be an interesting thread to pull at and follow in the coming years.
Okay, considering what you said about the fact that, countries will need to have their partners, you cannot possibly be in control of the entire supply chain, then what exactly does AI sovereignty mean in this context? Because everybody in every newspaper is throwing this buzzword around. It's almost become like a catchphrase, but I think then sovereignty also takes on a different meaning because it's not possible to be entirely self reliant. So, how does that work?
I think AI sovereignty, for all the um, catchiness it holds, is a kind of a misnomer, and we should probably just call it access or something like that. And it just comes down to whether a country can get what it wants when it wants. And the way that country does that may completely vary from another one. So maybe country A can do it because it has the military might to impose its wishes on the country that it is buying certain technology from. Or maybe it is economically so powerful, like the US, that denying it certain technology means that this country will be able to punish you in ways that will really yield bad outcomes to your own economy. And so you simply can't afford to turn that deal down. It's an offer you can't refuse. Or maybe it is that your country does something in the AI value chain so well that everyone else relies on you. So they need you for something, and so you use that to get what they can sell you in return. So it's a kind of a quid pro quo scenario, right? Or that you have so much cultural and political capital. Let's say some of the Canada or some of the Scandinavian countries have this, right? They have much more weight than what they probably should because of their ideological positions or their cultural capital. And so they can then wriggle their ways into some of these political alliances and gain access to critical technologies that they may need and don't necessarily have the leverage to get. So so there are various ways that countries will try and get access to the best of AI, cutting edge AI, in their own ways. And I don't think we have seen the last of the innovative steps that countries may take. China, for instance, has companies that are registered in China, but their HQs are all abroad, and it has its own diaspora abroad working for these organizations, and therefore acting as a conduit for tech transfers and technological knowledge to flow back to the country. So that's another way that they're trying to innovate around technology blockages and gain access to AI. So AI access is going to be a big thing, and that's why we have so many export controls. We have so many like ITAR and all these frameworks that control the movement of technology, but also new paths with which this technology is able to flow and round trip around and finally make its way to whoever needs it and needs it the most. So
That's actually really interesting. In fact, especially how China is managing to leverage its talent, even if it's abroad, is very fascinating. The hype around things like AI sovereignty reminded me, there's a lot of, we've discussed the broad elements of power, we've discussed what doesn't change and what changes and all of that. But I think, what we haven't touched upon yet, and what I think a lot of people don't understand, is how AI actually makes a difference. What tasks it augments, what sectors it helps, what areas it doesn't. Because most narratives seem to be like sort of fueled by the fluff around AGI, and then there's people talking an AI arms race, and they're talking about loss of jobs and boost of productivity. But beyond these trends, which I think right now are just trends, we don't know enough to know if any of these things are actually materializing. There seems to be very limited understanding of how AI actually is impacting different sectors. So I was wondering if you could throw some light on where you think it's actually impacting power at a sectoral level, and also just in terms of different functions and augmenting different functions.
Anything that needed huge amounts of data processing in terms of the number of eyes it took or the amount of time it took to comb through a lot of data to come up with some useful insights is now going to be a lot quicker if we use AI in that sector. And so that results in a lot of productivity gains across a lot of sectors. So decision support systems, for instance, when you're let's say your country is using surveillance technology to scan for, I don't know, for, controlling crime across the country through your CCTV footage. You can comb through larger amounts of data and gain quicker access to the results that you're looking for through the use of AI. Even at an individual level, creative tasks, low-skill creative tasks especially, get a huge boost from AI. And like you said, since it's a general purpose technology, there is space for AI in almost every sector that is computerized, at least, right? The entry of AI into the physical world through robots and robotics is also something that we constantly hear about and hear and say it's right around the corner, but that's yet to materialize still. But that's also something that a lot of companies are investing in and trying to, and that's apparently going to change things in the industrial levels where there's physical manufacturing and physical labor involved. But at least in the digital realm, there is productivity gains to be had in every single sector. In some sectors like marketing or creative management, you have AI actually replacing people already. But in others, it just makes people more productive, which means that the same sector will need fewer people to produce the same level of output or the required output in the coming years. So honestly, it's pervasive and it's cross-sectoral and it's everywhere. But it's also worth highlighting that there is a bit of a bubble here because this narrative suits everyone, right? There are a few narratives at play. One of them is that AGI is right around the corner. And when you hear that, you drive investments, and that suits the purposes of companies that are investing in these technologies. Another is that the productivity gains from AI is going to be unprecedented. Will there be productivity gains? Yes. How much are they? We don't know yet. And so when you pose this narrative of the gains being potentially limitless, you are again inviting investors and interest in your own product. And that explains why there is so much such high valuations for companies like Anthropic or GPT without actually OpenAI, without actually having profits that they show. They actually don't have profits on paper, but they have sky high valuations. So will the AI bubble pop, and will all of this change in the coming years, or will it actually live up to an extent to its promise? We are yet to see, but it's definitely interesting times.
Okay, like you said, of course, there's so much speculation right now, and if the bubble pops, then I'm sure the fallout will be huge, especially for the people who've poured money into the sector. But I think the coming years are going to show us what's going to happen and show us how this is going to unfold. And I think we'll also have a better idea of how it actually impacts national power. Because now we can speculate how it augments or takes away from different aspects of national power. But as of now, even when it comes to AI and defense, there's a lot of talk about how it should be plugged into this area and that area, and it can almost automate every other process, and data processing can be super fast, and decision support is going to change the way things work. But a lot of these things aren't happening on a regular basis yet. Like, there's testing, but it's not happening at a large scale. So yeah, I guess we'll find out. And well, I hope that's not too ominous of a note to leave our listeners on, but I guess just some food for thought.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening in, and Adya, we should definitely discuss this more as it evolves. All right. Thanks for having me. Good day.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.